Good morning. I hope everyone has a great day. I'm going to dictate a jury charge, and it's going to be at varying speeds, but not going to be too fast. So let's see how you do, and we'll take it one stroke at a time. Ready? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, after the attorneys have presented their summations, you will go to the jury room. You will then select one of your members as your presiding juror. It shall be your presiding juror's duty to preside over your discussions and deliberations upon the case, vote with you, and, when you have unanimously agreed upon a verdict, to certify your verdict by signing the same as your presiding juror. You will have this charge with you in the jury room, and you shall refer to it for guidance during your deliberations. Suitable forms for your verdict are attached hereto. Your verdict must be in writing and signed by your presiding juror. Your sole duty at this time is to determine the guilt or innocence of the defendant under the indictment in this case, and restrict your deliberations solely to the issue of whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. Do not let bias, prejudice, or sympathy play any part in your deliberations. When words are used in this charge in a sense that varies from the meaning commonly understood, you are given a proper legal definition, which you are bound to accept in place of any other meaning. Bold-face lettering of words or phrases indicates that such words or phrases are defined in this charge and nothing else. After you have arrived at your verdict, you will notify the bailiff that you have reached your verdict. You are the exclusive judges of the facts proved or the credibility of the witnesses, and of the weight to be given to the testimony, but you are bound to receive the law from the court as it is given to you in this charge, and you are bound to be governed thereby. You shall consider only the evidence and exhibits presented here in the courtroom through the witnesses who have testified. If you want to have the exhibits with you in the jury room for your deliberations, advise the bailiff. In deliberating on this case, you shall not talk to anyone except the members of the jury about it until you have been finally discharged from service on this jury. If you want to communicate with the court, explain what you want in writing and deliver your message, signed by your presiding juror, to the bailiff, who will deliver it to the court. Do not orally explain to the bailiff what you want. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charge. All persons are presumed to be innocent, and no person may be convicted of any offense unless each element of the offense is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The law does not require a defendant to prove his innocence or produce any evidence at all, unless the jurors are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence in the case. The presumption of innocence alone is sufficient to acquit the defendant. You are instructed that the grand jury indictment is not evidence of guilt. It is a means whereby the defendant is brought to trial in a felony prosecution. It is not evidence, nor can it be considered by you in passing upon the innocence or guilt of the defendant. The prosecution has the burden of proving the defendant guilty, and it must do so by proving each and every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt, and if it fails to do so, you must acquit the defendant. In the event you have a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt after considering all the evidence before you and these instructions, you will acquit him and say by your verdict, not guilty. The defendant, Alfonso Saldana, stands charged with theft over $1,500, less than $20,000, to alleged to have occurred on or about the 9th day of January, 2004, and on or about the 7th day of February 2004 in El Paso County, Texas. To these charges, the defendant has pled not guilty. I now give you the law that applies to this case. Our law provides that a person commits the offense of theft if he unlawfully appropriates property with intent to deprive the owner of such property. I now give you the statutory definitions. All other words have the meaning commonly understood, and I cannot define them for you. Appropriate means to acquire or otherwise exercise control over property other than real property. Appropriation of property is unlawful if it is without the owner's effective consent. Property means tangible personal property or documents, including money, that represents or embodies anything of value. Deprive, as used herein, means to withhold property from the owner permanently or for so extended a period of time that a major portion of the value or enjoyment of the property is lost to the owner. Owner means a person who has title to the property, possession of the property, or a greater right to possession of the property than the person charged. Now, if you find from the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about the 9th day of January 2004 in El Paso County, Texas, the defendant, Alfonso Saldana, did then and there commit the offense of theft by then and there unlawfully appropriate property with intent to deprive the owner of such property, then you shall find the defendant guilty of theft as charged in count 1 of the indictment. Unless you so find beyond a reasonable doubt, or if you have a reasonable doubt thereof, you will acquit the defendant, Alfonso Saldana, of theft, count 1. Now, if you find from the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about the 7th day of February 2004 in El Paso County, Texas, the defendant, Alfonso Saldana, did then and there commit the offense of theft by then and there unlawfully appropriate property with intent to deprive the owner of such property, then you shall find the defendant guilty of theft as charged in count 2 of the indictment. Unless you so find beyond a reasonable doubt, or if you have a reasonable doubt thereof, you will acquit the defendant, Alfonso Saldana, of theft, count 2. Instructions for deliberations. After you have retired to your jury room, you should select one of your members as your foreperson. It is his or her duty to preside at your deliberations, vote with you, and when you have unanimously agreed upon a verdict, to certify your verdict by signing the same as foreperson. Suitable forms of your verdict are hereto attached. Your verdict must be in writing and signed by your foreperson. Your sole duty at this time is to determine the guilt or innocence of the defendant in this cause and restrict your deliberations solely to the issue of whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. If you want to communicate with the court, explain what you want in writing and deliver your message signed by your foreperson to the bailiff. He will deliver it to the court. Do not orally explain to the bailiff. Concerning manner of deliberation. A. In order to return a verdict, each juror must agree thereto. B. Jurors have the duty to consult with one another to deliberate with a view of reaching an agreement, if it can be done without violence to individual judgment. C. Each juror must decide the case for themselves, but only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with their fellow jurors. D. In the course of deliberations, a juror should not hesitate to re-examine their own views and change their opinions if convinced it is erroneous. E. No juror should surrender their honest conviction as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of their fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. F. If the jury is unable to reach a verdict, it will be necessary for the court to declare a mistrial and discharge the jury. The case will still be pending, and it is reasonable to assume that the case will be tried again before another jury at some future time. Any future jury will be impaneled in the same way this jury has been impaneled and will likely hear the same evidence which has been presented to this jury. The questions to be determined by that jury will be the same as the questions confronting you, and there is no hope that the next jury will find those questions any easier to decide than you have found them. The foreperson or any juror who observes a violation of the court's instruction shall immediately warn the one who is violating the same and caution the juror not to do so again. In arriving at your verdict, it will be proper to fix the same by lot, chance, or any other method than by full, fair, and free exercise of the opinion of the individual jurors under the evidence admitted before you. That is a jury charge. I think it was probably around 150 to 180, somewhere around there. Not too bad. I wanted to go through a couple of places in here that have some common phrases that you might want to think about putting together, because you're going to hear these pretty consistently in jury charges, especially in Texas and maybe other places. But when I was talking about, now if you find from the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that on or about, that right there can be phrased in a couple of short strokes. If you're not thinking about that, if you find, I write it F-U-F-N-D. Now it's an unusual stroke, but you have time to stroke it out. From the evidence, I do F-R-E-F-D, and beyond a reasonable doubt, Y-A-R-L-D. Some do it Y-R-D, Y-R-L-D, and then on or about, I do O-E-R-B, and then on or about thee is O-E-R-B-T. Those are common in jury charges. And then the other one is, did then and there commit the offense of theft by then and there. And then and there, I do N-A-I-R. That's N-A-I-R for then and there. Those are a couple of nice little shortcuts for a couple of jury charges that you hear frequently. And I hope that was a good jury charge. I hope my diction was good and that you were able to follow along. If not, you have many chances to replay and keep on pressing down on those keys. And that was probably around 10 minutes of jury charge practice for you. And if it was too fast, that's something to work on. And if it wasn't fast enough, but it allowed you to work on your accuracy, then that's a good thing. With that, I am out. Bye.